Hey guys, Ryan and Tam here for Joker. We're doing a full movie review, breakdown, everything.
Yeah, we'll also have a look at the inspirations behind the movie and point out some of the Easter eggs that we spotted. But before we get into that, make sure that you've seen the movie because this is going to be spoilerific. If you just want to watch the video without seeing the movie, that's a very Joker move, so have at it. Good luck to you, weirdo.
All right, Tam, so Joker, a lot to talk about here. It's an origin story of one of Batman's greatest foes. As Todd Phillips puts it, it's about becoming Joker.
Yeah, it's the origin story for the villain, and it's done in a way that's quite shocking. Like we're used to seeing this kind of stuff on panels and pages, but every time a character from comics is taken to movies, it's always like the simplest form of it, right?
Yeah.
Like people who love comic books and love the source material, which is our audience, they understand and they see that nuance, or they see beneath the surface. But when they watch the movies, we get a very pale portrayal of that character. This is, for better and worse, perhaps the most accurate and nuanced version of the Joker that we've ever seen on film, to the point where it might be too much and kind of scary.
Really scary, yeah. And that's a good point, is like normally you have some context if you're a comic book reader before going into one of these films. So you can like pull out the things that you notice and kind of where you're going. This, it almost seems as if it's not a comic book movie and it's a story that could work without the title Joker.
Yeah.
It's just called Arthur. But it's extremely effective in how someone can be kind of pushed down this path.
Yeah, it is. I think about people who only have the movies as a frame of reference.
Right.
And only have the kind of, I don't want to call, but I was going to say cookie cutter, almost like candy version of that character. And the various versions we've had before, some of them are a bit dark, like Heath Ledger's one specifically.
Yeah.
But compared to this one, those are very much cookie cutter, like very, candy coated versions. And if those people who are used to that go into this movie, they are in for a very rude awakening. Like, I'm so surprised that DC allowed this to happen, that Warner Brothers even allowed it to happen. When I saw the logo on it, I was like, at the end, I was like, holy moly, it's a shock to the system. Unlike any other superhero story that we've ever seen on film.
Totally. And let's talk about it for a second. It is very much a standalone film, so don't expect it to be attached to any of these DCEU versions that we've seen, movies that have come out as of recently, especially. It's set way back in 1981, so there is enough time, and aesthetically just looks so different than anything we've seen. I would say it's closer to like a Logan on the scale of kind of more of a personal and kind of a smaller scale like situation, but definitely none of the big CGI backdrops, none of that stuff. A very personal story. Yeah,
this feels like almost like an art house movie, and it is trying to very purposefully evoke that. It's a period piece as much as it is kind of like a character exploration and kind of like a look into the psyche of someone. I would be surprised. I think Todd Phillips has said no, this character will never see any other version of Batman that exists past, present, or future. And honestly, I don't know how this version of Joker doesn't exist with any Hollywood version that could be created. The Batman that needs to be created to work with that Joker, I don't know if that exists or can exist in Hollywood, which is both exciting and like kind of sad. Yeah. So one of the interesting kind of like takeaways that I had of it, one of the reads that I got out of it, and maybe it's just personal, but like I'm one of those people that grew up as a kid fantasizing about a world where heroes exist.
Yeah.
Like many others probably did, specifically like a world where Batman exists. And almost this is kind of a statement that says, this movie is a statement that says, well, if you fantasize about a world where those heroes exist, you also need to accept that the flip side exists, where those villains exist.
Yeah.
And I walked away from the movie thinking, oh man, like to create a hero is like a fantastical set of circumstances, right? Like, a being from Krypton appears, or a lantern ring is gifted to someone. There's some sort of out of this world kind of circumstance that creates that. Villains, especially for Joker, aren't as fantastically created. They're just a few bad days away from being that villain. Joker specifically, Arthur Fleck in this movie specifically, when the stuff that happens on screen that leads to that character, that psyche, that personality coming out, it's not hard to believe. Like, it's just very real harshnesses of life.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that you're like, oh yeah, if I'm having this fantasy, this is the darker side of it that no one ever really thinks about. The movies are always focused on the hero origin and the hero's arc, but off to the side is like a very, very like sharp and very real villain's arc that could happen.
Yeah, and then the way that the perspective that we see in this film, you know, the bad guys is the situation he's in, the society and everything around him, the poverty, and his place in society, and the feeling of being completely ostracized and just kind of forgotten, or never even noticed in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of, you feel sympathetic towards this situation and what he's in. Obviously, as the movie progresses, though, that recedes, but it's a very interesting take on kind of flipping how we follow that character.
It's that seed, like it's urban alienation and almost feeling like lost in a concrete jungle, never seen by anyone. Like there's a line in there where he talks about wondering if he even exists.
Right.
And it's not, that thought and that feeling isn't crazy. Like it's something that everyone has now and then.
Everyone can relate to that,
yeah, everyone can relate to that. Like, you have this out of body moment where you're like, am I even a person? What am I doing here? Like, and then that is something that you can relate to. And that's I don't know if I want to call it the magic of the movie, because it's really hard to praise the movie, even though I really liked it, but it's also like where you know where it's going, and that place is not good. Yeah. But like, this movie does a great, at least to start with, job of making you empathize with this character. Yeah. You're like, I understand why you're behaving this way. You have been mistreated, thrown aside. You clearly have issues. You are struggling to be someone and be recognized and find your way in the world. And in that phase of the movie, you're like, I get you, man. I know people like you. I could be you. Maybe I was you at one point. But then it escalates, and then it gets worse and worse and worse, and then you have this character emerging of the Joker, and you're like, damn, that path, like how you got here, it's not all that, like, it's not hard for it to see that happening to someone else.
It's just a snap that turns into something where it gets violent.
Yeah, and that's
obviously a psychopath and killing
that's
people.
The scary thing about it.
That's the scary part.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of reminds me of, I've seen the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas.
I think I have.
It's a really good movie, but it's basically following his life, and he kind of just snaps, literally in traffic on the freeway, and it's like all these things you could kind of see leading to this moment where it's like there's two paths to go down. Yes,
exactly. I guess that is one of those inspirations, right? And that we picked up on, and it's just such a real series of circumstances, and that's what makes it scary and also relatable, which I think is a powerful part of this movie.
Totally. Let's talk about kind of the plot, how we kind of are introduced to him. So he's working for a clown for hire type organization, and you know, it's his early 80s in Gotham, kind of you know, mimics a little bit of like New York City in that time, obviously. And he, you know, his life is pretty quiet and boring. He just kind of does the daily thing, and he's helping his mom out who's sick. We find out, and you know, he has a mental condition, and we don't learn about it until later, like kind of about like the background on it.
Right.
But he's kind of cast aside, and you know, and Gotham around him is kind of falling around in terms of like helping its citizens.
Yeah. So there is an element of that. Another one of those things where it's kind of weirdly relevant is there's that rich elites and like the 1% controlling the fates of those who, you know, the broader population, who are never actually acknowledged. Interestingly, the kind of vector for that is Thomas Wayne, Bruce Wayne's father, who's running for mayor, and he does the classic out of touch politician thing where he refers to the people of the city as like who are almost kind of like objecting to the 1%ers and the rich as clowns. And that kind of, that's a spark. That is a spark. But like that element of it is that's the kind of furnace in which this character, what transforms Arthur Fleck, right? That's the instigating or the inciting incident for him, or the context around it.
Yeah.
He exists in a world where not only is he not relevant to anyone. He's not taken care of. He's not seen. But most people on the ground level are in the same position as him.
Totally.
So it's almost like if he didn't snap, someone else would have snapped.
Yeah. And on top of that, the condition that he's in, he's a punching bag for a lot of other people as well. Even on the same level as him. Yeah, he's literally getting beat up by, teenagers on the street. He's getting made fun of at his place of employment.
Yeah.
And he sees a much grander vision for his life, right? He sees he fantasizes about a life that isn't anything close to what he has.
He has the American dream.
Yeah.
Which is another scary part of it. His fantasy is a very relatable, real fantasy. Many of the people who exist in Hollywood today have that fantasy, right? They see them, they watch a TV show.
That'll be me. That'll be me one day.
Yeah. Being like, that's me. I want to be that person.
Yeah.
And like they watch a like chat show host, and they're like, I want to be the comedian that host brings out. Right. And that's kind of like, that's relatable. Again, I'm coming back to like it being relatable, and it's just like, so he does have a vision for his life, but the reality is he can't make that happen. Circumstances, and like he's got more than most. Like he has the mental illness that they kind of allude to the point, and it's one of the ways they explain the Joker laugh.
Right.
It's like he carries a card which. I didn't read the card fully. I didn't absorb it properly, but it's forgive me. But it's like I have a condition that I laugh in circumstances where it doesn't seem likely. So the Joker laugh is explained because he hit his head. He hurt himself at some point, and he has a lot of like obstacles. But again, these dreams, real dreams, and then the real inciting incident is when one day he's attacked by a bunch of well-off, businessmen types on a train, and he happens to have a gun on him that was given to him by someone at work to protect himself after he got beaten up by the teenagers. Mm-hmm. And that was it. He just snaps and kills them. Yeah. And it turns out that those are Wayne Enterprises employees. They're Thomas Wayne kind of like employees, and then that leads to a kind of fallout. Right. In the rest of the city.
And then he further slides into darkness when, as you mentioned earlier about him not feeling like he exists, the entire reality that he's based his life on, he finds out is not completely true. That there's some things he thought about his mom and about his father or would-be father. It's none of that's really true at all. And his mom was sick herself, and she was in an abusive relationship, and he got an injury. He was abused, obviously, by the man in their lives as well. So he has this, there's daddy issues going on, but also his entire life, the foundation of his life, is completely falls out beneath him.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's someone he mentions it a few times. He's brought into this world. He thought he was brought into this world to spread joy and love, and his parents, his mum, always told him to keep a smile on his face, and he's done that in a life that is pretty bad, like awful circumstances. Yeah. But he's trying to make the most of it. He's already on unstable grounds, but like. He's doing his best, and then something else comes along and pulls that crappy reality away and says, it's a crappier reality for you. And he's like, that's the second knockout punch for him. And learning that his mother has been hiding secrets from him, and also that his mother may be responsible for a lot of the things that have gone wrong with him. He might have had a shot if it wasn't for her decisions. Yeah. That's kind of what tears at this character and like really shreds his soul. And once he goes through that process, that metamorphosis, the kind of like eroding of the humanity, the little humanity he had, that's when it's like, this is full Joker now. This is what gives birth to someone who embodies chaos and embodies and welcomes it. When you have literally nothing, and even when you tried, you were shot down and beaten down.
And he even says that at the end, right? When he says, I have nothing else to lose. When he's like, why would you do this? Like, he's like kind of, he's shed that skin and any of those concerns, and it's just like he doesn't care anymore. He has nothing to worry about. It's like, this is all I got. This is what I am. This is who I am. And then he sees kind of the have-nots around him that have kind of rallied around him. They give him that adulation and they give him that praise. And for once he's seen. Right.
Exactly.
So finally he's seen, where his whole life he feels like he's been nothing.
Yeah, and that's something that happens in the comics as well, but it's also something that people who may not be as familiar, that's a familiar motif with the comics. That's a familiar motif for Batman. That's what he does, right? He inspires Gothamites by being a presence there. So this is the flip side of that Batman feeling, right? Where just as Batman can inspire people to seek justice and stand their ground and rely on him to kind of like fight for them, Joker can be that person for the downtrodden on the other side of the coin. And that's what this is a reminder of. Like this is his origin story in that same regard. You know, it kind of not inciting, but like having those people rally around him and having those similarly cast aside people have their own figure to fight for them and talk for them and speak for them. And it's just a fascinating character study of a person, and it feels quite real. And what I love about it more than anything is the Joker through the ages, whether it's comics, TV, or movies, has always represented the fear of that time. Like Heath Ledger, for example, came at a time when the idea of a surveillance state was something gripping people, right? Yeah. And his actions are what lead to Bruce Wayne almost creating a surveillance state around him. And this is a Joker that exists in a time where people are afraid of like political extremism and senseless public violence out of nowhere. It's an unfortunate reality of the society we live in around the world, and that's what this movie is about as well. It hits at a nerve with the audience that you may not be aware of then, but when you think about it, it comes to the forefront of your mind. And I think that's why a lot of people are struggling with saying they enjoyed it.
Right.
I wouldn't say I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you and I had the same problem.
Yeah, so we came out and that was a good film, well made, well acted, well shot, great representation of a character, but it's also a reminder that the world is a harsher place than we realize.
Yeah, it's a warning for all of us.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But, you know, you wouldn't be surprised if you saw some of those things like on the news headlines. You know what I mean? Like it's super horrific and scary and tragic, obviously, but it seems so real for the times.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's, like I said, I think that's going to be the divisive part of it. Like when we talk about the movie to our colleagues and friends here, and like we mention, like they're like, oh, what did you think about it? They come at it with an energy of a superhero film. They're like, oh, what was it like? Or like any movie.
Definitely
like,
not that
how
bad.
is it like? And you have to almost slam on the brakes for them to be like, I know you want to see this movie, but you can't go in there with this attitude, man. You're going to have a real rough time in there.
Which is weird for a piece of entertainment, right?
Yeah.
We go to kind of escape our worlds for entertainment, you know, and to have that kind of put back in your face, it's a little bit difficult to sit with.
And I think that's one of the things that I was going to say makes this movie special, but maybe the smart thing is to say like distinguishes this movie from other superhero movies. Yeah. Dark Knight is one of my favorite movies of all time because I adore Batman and the world of DC and Batman. This is, for my money, the best superhero or comic book movie created, because it's not just a good comic book film. Yeah. It's a good film. Right. Like, and it has a message that goes beyond. It has moral grays. It's not good guy punches a bad guy, which no matter how good Dark Knight is, fundamentally that's what it comes down to: good guy and bad guy. Yeah. It has some complications. It's like a little more twisted than that, and it has some moral gray area. But this is like a story unlike any other superhero movie told, or a comic book movie has ever told. And this is the kind of thing where when we read comics, this is what we see. And we wish the others could read what we're reading out of this. When I read the Joker and people are like, yeah, he's the clown. It's like, no, there's so much more beneath the surface. This is a gut punch that shows you that is the case. So the culmination of all this tumultuous kind of evolution of the character is Arthur Fleck, Joker, gets introduced as Joker because he goes onto a chat show where his favorite comedian of all time and host brings him out and just reveals that he killed those 1%ers, let's call them, the Wayne Enterprises employees, admits it on camera to the world, and the host tries to question him on it, and eventually he just pulls out a gun and tells one final joke and shoots him on live TV in the head. And that just leads to inciting a riot where everyone rises up. There's been this growing clown presence where he's become this almost like figure, a martyr, to a voice for them, to standing up against the Thomas Waynes of the city, and they erupt. And it's just chaos in Gotham.
Riots all around the city while he's just sitting there and kind of basking in what he's created, or what the support that he has behind him.
The validation he finally got.
Yes, that he never had before. And then the imagery at the very end, it struck me, just seeing him kind of just dancing and with all of his audience. He kind of became that an entertainer in that moment. And you see literally, it's beautifully shot. It's obviously horrific just on the scale of what was going on, but like it's like the imagery of the villain that we've always known from every movie, right?
And you can see him becoming that over the course of the movie.
Yeah.
Like he starts off and he's awkward, and then there's a point like a quarter of the way through where he kills the people, the Wayne Enterprises employees, and the first thing he does is he goes into a bathroom and just starts gracefully dancing.
Right.
And up until that point, we've seen him like Joaquin Phoenix has put himself clearly through some things to
over 50 pounds lost.
He's a frail skeleton, and like the first time you see him with his shirt off, he looks like a cocoon.
Yeah.
He looks horrible, disfigured, and then you see him in that bathroom, and he's like elegant, and he's just and over the course of the movie, there's this kind of these scenes where he dances and becomes ever more graceful. And over time, a little more showmanship is appearing. And it's that Joker that we know, the performer, the kind of artist that demands the attention, very slowly clawing to the surface. And that the way Joaquin Phoenix like portrays that, the madness, in the dancing, in the way he conducts himself, in the laughs. Like if you listen to his Joker laughs, for me, maybe I'm imagining it, I'm reading too much into it, but when he does it at the start, it's something he controls to try and like keep down. Like he's trying to force it down, it's bad.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the movie, he's embracing it. He's doing the Joker laugh as the main thing. And that's the Joker we know. That's the Joker that terrifies Gotham and keeps Batman on his toes.
That's a good point. I saw in the beginning, early on, it was more of like a, it was more like it came from a source of pain.
Yeah.
Like it was like masking. It was like he couldn't control it, and it would just pop out like in situations where he didn't want it to, or the connotation of a laugh, like it would hurt the other person that he was in the same room as. And literally you see him like physically like kind of keel over.
Yeah, because he's like,
his throat would hurt.
He laughs and there's like almost like he's coughing up a furball at the same time. Like he's like vomiting and trying to keep it down.
Right, and then later on, it's just kind of his signature, and it doesn't. There's nothing to be ashamed of or any of that kind of stuff.
He's embraced the chaos. But like the interesting thing is like the movie ends in a way that it asks you to really think about what you've seen and whether any of it's true, because there's various cast members. Zazie Beetz is in the movie as like a neighbor, and she briefly interacts with Arthur Fleck in an elevator, and very quickly they seem to be in a relationship. Like
happens way too quick.
And then towards the end of the movie, you realize like she goes to see him perform, and he chokes on stage, like tells the worst jokes, and it cuts to her, and she's having a great time. Like she's like, oh, that's my guy, he's doing great. And obviously,
you'd be like,
and obviously it turns out that he saw her, and he created a life for them together.
Well, we know that he was like stalking her.
Yes, he stalked her. Yeah.
So he fascinated, like just like he fantasized about going on Murray Franklin's show.
Yeah.
He fantasized this entire relationship and courtship with a neighbor that he met once or twice in the elevator.
Yeah.
And then the shocker is when he sits in, that alone would be a ridiculously scary and horrific image to see a neighbor soaking wet in your living room.
In your living room. Yeah. And there's a moment where she's like, my daughter's in the other room, please.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh God, what's gonna happen here?
Oh no, that was
And that was like, it's just so tense. And then like that whole relationship dynamic, it sets up the idea that anything that Arthur feels is good, or anything that looks good that's happening to Arthur, is imagined and is perhaps not happening. But then you have to think about, what does Arthur perceive as being good for him?
Right.
So that leads into kind of like towards the end of the movie, where he gets the validation by causing this chaos. Is that real?
Yeah. I until you brought that up to me, I thought it was all real.
Yeah.
And now having gone back and thought about it, it sounds like all the positive reinforcement that he sees or gets, it could possibly be all in his head.
So like the movie ends with a final scene where he's in some sort of asylum, probably Arkham.
Yeah.
White, outfit with a doctor in front of him, and he's laughing. And it's unclear whether this is after he's been captured and put into Arkham, assuming it's Arkham, or if he's always been there and he's laughing to himself. And the kind of doctor asks, "What are you laughing at?" And he's like, "It's a joke I've been thinking about. You wouldn't get it." Like, is the entire thing up until that point
sick, twisted joke?
The joke that is in his head, because then it's insinuated that he kills her.
Right.
Right.
With blood on his feet.
Yeah, he walks out and he's blood on his feet, and he's like doing a little dance, and
he's running away.
Yeah. Like, was all that up until that point? Was that the moment he snapped instead of the moment we saw?
Wow.
Because if that was all in his head, that could be when he snapped and he killed the doctor in front of him, and that's the creation of Joker. It was all in his mind up until that point. Because from my read is having people chant his name and kind of like raise him up as this messiah of the downtrodden. It's a bit too positive for him. Like, we already know that anything that good he thinks is good happening to him is a lie.
Doesn't really happen.
So that seems like a lie to me. But it's unclear. Like,
yeah, the ambiguity works perfectly here because you don't know exactly what you're saying is true, and like you said, the unreliable narrator that Arthur Fleck is.
Yeah.
And the movie is literally there's not a frame with him not in it. It's all his perspective. We learn that. And the shots are really tight on him the whole time, right? He's taking up the entire movie. He's carrying this whole movie. So, what can we really? What's real and what's not? And
then it kind of like extends into the Easter egg part of it. Like, it touches on the Batman mythos at one point, where Joe Chill, who kills Thomas and Martha Wayne, steals the pearl, and effectively births Batman in that moment, is part of the riots that Arthur Fleck created. He was wearing one of the clown masks, and you see him go into an alley and kill the Waynes and orphan Bruce. But is that real? Like, that connects in a very strange way to the existing Batman mythos, right? It's just like, is that something that he's imagined in his head, or is that?
I mean, yeah. To keep it consistent, you'd have to think that at least that happened, right?
Did it though?
I mean, it is its own movie, right? So we don't.
Yeah.
They don't need to connect to anything.
They don't need to.
I mean,
no.
They could just like wink at things, right? Wink at things that we know as fans of the universe. But
did it already happen? And he read it in a newspaper or saw a report and put himself into it.
We did see him pull newspaper clippings and put it in his journal. I mean, perhaps he was so interested in what was going around in the climate of the society that.
And let's not forget that his mother was diagnosed with delusional illness, which, I mean, if it extends to him, who was abused, would also create a circumstance where he would imagine these kind of things. Right. It's a movie that is difficult to watch, but it also begs rewatching.
Yes.
And
it's a tough thing, right?
It's a tough thing.
It's a hard watch, but it's like I gotta go see it again just to kind of really grasp everything that's going on.
Yeah, because once you know what's going on, you can look at the clues, and it's like seeing Sixth Sense for the second time and noticing the moments where Bruce Willis is dead the entire time. Spoilers for Sixth Sense, sorry.
Oh, how dare you? How dare you? Don't get mad at me.
But yeah, there are a few Easter eggs, including Thomas Wayne's a big one.
It's a big one.
Bruce is in the movie. There's a butler kind of person. I don't know if it was.
Alfred?
It's never meant. He's never identified as Alfred, but he seems. I think he was English.
Yeah.
Could be Alfred. There are various other things. Arkham Asylum is mentioned a few times.
Yeah.
There's like allusions to the world around you. Nothing big, and there's no like. This is the kind of film where I was confident that there was no post-credit thing. I was like, that's not happening.
We can leave the theater now. Don't wait. There's not going to be anything.
That kind of highlights how disconnected from current superhero movies as an industry, as a Hollywood kind of like presence, and as a piece of art. This is not. Don't expect.
It's anti-Marvel in every sense of being looking pretty and packaged nicely for small kids and adults. and having any of that interconnectedness between everything or finding those big clues. It's something that you can just watch and just take it from there and not have to kind of worry about it afterwards.
Fair play to DC for doing this. Like, it's very, very, like, to my mind, the parallel to it is almost like the Year One / Earth One kind of like retellings of a story, where they take, you know, Jeff Johns is known for doing the Batman one, I believe, and it's a grittier, real version of a Batman story that we know, more grounded in reality. This feels like the first film instance of that happening, where they take something that we all know and they show you it in a very stark, very harsh light and make it feel believable. This is the film version of an Earth One trade almost, and I'm excited to see DC do it. I hope they carry on doing it. I don't know, I feel like this is a pretty high bar to hit. I don't know what other characters they could do this with. I'd love to see them do it though, and you know, who knows, like a Mr. Freeze in a similar vein, it will definitely be more fantastical.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
But there's a story to be told there between Nora and Freeze and the kind of that tragic husband and wife kind of ordeal. I hope they do more.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the comic books, but how about some other like film inspirations that we noticed? It's pretty obvious in this movie. Martin Scorsese, his look is kind of all over this film. The new Hollywood filmmakers of this era, of the 60s to the 80s, it screams like Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy off the bat. Like just how it looks, kind of the tone that is set, and the plot and setting.
Yeah, it's very distinctly that kind of movie, a Scorsese film. You get that vibe from it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that he was supposed to be working on this, right? At one point.
He was supposed to be a producer, and then he had to drop out. He's obviously doing The Irishman, but I think his producing partner still did this.
Right.
So clearly there was some influence.
Yeah,
and he's one of the greatest filmmakers, so why not?
Yeah, exactly. Why not? And like, if you're going to emulate anyone, it might as well be Martin Scorsese. Yeah. And it definitely serves a purpose between it being like a character study, a deep dive into this kind of like mind of someone who's incredibly damaged, which is something that you know, those kind of movies do. Yeah. But also like visually, it really helps tell the story, gives it. If this is the most real Gotham has ever felt to me. Yeah. Regardless of where you're coming at it, whether it's like the Nolan movies or, you know, Gotham the TV series, there's always a hint of comic bookiness to it. The lights are just a bit too bright, the buildings are just a bit too black or tall, and it feels like a kind of like a comic book world realized in kind of live action. Whereas this feels just like a real, believable kind of New York City kind of place. And that comes from emulating that kind of filmmaking style, right? And presenting a rawness to the surroundings.
Yeah, and you even get you get Robert De Niro, who's obviously attached to those films, and then you get him in this, and it's like you can't look away from the fact that there's some influence there.
Yeah.
I mean, you get him kind of playing with his gun in his apartment by himself, you know, pointing it like Travis Bickle did in Taxi Driver, and then you get him like his kind of, as he preps to get on the show, right? Imagining he's on the show and kind of how he would even wave to the audience. Yeah. Just like in The King of Comedy, you know, doing the audition tape that he did in that film. So it was a very kind of some fun homages to all those films. Yeah. Now in terms of music, we get some Frank Sinatra songs. We get a lot of like kind of fitting on the nose music selections for what we're watching. Send in the Clowns, like, I mean, it's a clown movie.
That was the one I both expected to come up, and it did, and it was used effectively. I think a lot of the music used here is very effective. It is on the nose, but it didn't stick out when it happened. Like, even the Send in the Clown moment was a threatening use of it. Like, the most prominent use of it for me anyway was like, it was used to tear him down, to tear Arthur down, and that's the spirit of that song almost. There's like a sadness to it. I always remember it in my mind as being sung by Krusty the Clown, which kind of ruins it. But like still in that moment, the sadness comes through in it, and it kind of like, it elevates that scene a little more.
Right, totally.
So really effective, really smart musical choices in this movie for sure.
There are obviously a ton more references and Easter eggs. We're not going to get into everything, but let's talk about Joaquin Phoenix as Joker.
Yeah.
Where does he rank if you had to? I know this is like a ridiculous question. We always are ranking things on the internet, but if you had to, where does he kind of sit after you came out of the movie? How did it affect you?
I think the difficulty is I'll always have a soft spot for, well, The best Joker is Mark Hamill, if you ask me. That's the one. Undisputed, he's the best Joker.
He's amazing.
For me, he's amazing.
Yeah.
His laugh, Mark Hamill's this brief Mark Hamill aside, it sends chills down my spine every time I see it.
It's pretty incredible.
And hear it.
Yeah.
I watch the Batman Arkham behind the scenes videos constantly because you can see him doing it. You can actually see him like performing it. And it's just so powerful.
He was one of the few, I saw, like, one of the few voice actors that had to like stand up to do it when everyone else was sitting.
Yeah,
he brings so much to it.
Yeah. But like, I'll always have a soft spot for Heath Ledger. His being attached to one of my favorite films of all time.
Yeah.
But I think this is an incredibly like high ranking for me performance. There's not many left anyway. But I mean, there's the Gotham one is great. Jerome is pretty good, but and Cesar Romero back in the day. Jack Nicholson, yeah. But this is probably my tied for second favorite.
Yeah.
I almost put him aside where he's like not a comic book character.
That's true.
He's just a human.
Right.
Like, this is a broken person. And in that respect, representing what Joker stands for and the circumstances in which he can become a thing that exists, I think he's pretty high. I think he's perhaps one of the most compelling and relatable and Joker that you can empathize with.
Right.
But also at the same time, he's ruthless and sad and terrifying in the way that a Joker should be. So pretty high.
Totally. Yeah, I agree with you. It's hard to rank like these are some of the greatest actors or performances that we've ever seen in film and or animated. He's one of the few people in the world that could do this, though. Yeah. There's not many people that could ever do this. And temporarily, at least, I wasn't like, I didn't like, I forgot about the others for the duration of the movie, if that makes sense. Like, it wasn't like the cloud of Heath Ledger and Jack Nicholson or Hamill or like clouding over your, like, it's like, okay, I believe this. You know what I mean? Like, for those 2 hours, you're like, holy shit, this guy is Joker.
Yeah. And
he brings a different like physicality as well, like you said. I mean, the dancing, his body, how he, contorts his body into these weird movements.
Yeah.
The laugh, it's completely different than anything else we've heard.
Yeah.
It's its own thing.
And it like punctuates. It's every time he laughs, it's a stab. Like it feels like a stab. There's times when he's just walking down a corridor and just does laugh, and you're like caught off guard by it, and it's like. You have to catch your breath because you're like, why did he do that? That's so unsettling.
Yeah.
And like I think it's like the extreme other end of the spectrum from Heath Ledger, who did the that kind of like that laugh. This is like he took it and twisted it in his own way. I think Joaquin Phoenix also twists that laugh into a different thing that is equally unsettling and powerful. We should rank Joker laughs sometime.
All right, guys, that'll do it for us here. Tam and I agree this is one of the best films of the year. It's one of the best comic book movies that we've ever seen, even though it kind of isn't really a comic book movie that we know are comic book movies that we've come to learn. So let us know what you guys think in the comments below.
And if you want to kind of come back to your senses, go to YouTube and type in Joaquin Phoenix upside down face. Have you seen that video of him where he's upside down and his frowns look like a really angry face? It's one of the funniest videos on the internet, and I watched it like 7 times after to just try and get the weight of the Joker off me.
Wow.
It's fantastic. That's a pro tip.
Amazing pro tip. I'm going to do that right now because I have no idea what he's talking about. Okay, guys, we'll see you next time.